You're listening to the Immortal Icons of Dance podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Johnson. In this week's episode, we will learn about the great Russian ballerina, Alexandra Danilova. She was known to her students as Madame Danilova, or simply Madame, and friends knew her as Choura. Choura was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, in 1904. She entered the Imperial Ballet School at age 8, where she trained with classmate George Balanchine. She made her stage debut later that year in a walk-on role in the opera Faust, sharing the stage with none other than Shaliapin. She lived through difficult times as a student during the Russian Revolution, which often left the students hungry and at times forced to chop up the school's furniture to burn for firewood to keep warm in the winter. Nonetheless, she graduated from the school in 1920 and joined the Mariinsky Ballet in 1921, performing for the Tsar and the imperial family. In 1922, she was promoted to soloist. During this time, Balanchine formed a group of dancers called the Youth Ballet, made up of several young dancers in the Mariinsky Ballet who had been classmates together at the school. In the post-revolution era, the directors of the ballet were perturbed by the nature of Balanchine's experimental group, and they expelled Balanchine from the Mariinsky immediately. It was at this time that Choura realized the stifled arts landscape in the post-revolutionary Russia would not be conducive to launching a dance career. In 1924, she defected from Russia and escaped to Germany with Balanchine, Balanchine's first wife, Tamarajeva, and Kola Efimov. The four performed ballets on variety programs around Berlin, Vienna, and London, until an invitation came for them to go to Paris to meet Sergei Diaghilev, the impresario of the Ballet Russe. She joined Diaghilev's Ballet Russe in 1925, dancing works by Bronislava Nijinsky, George Balanchine, and Leonid Messine. During their years with the Diaghilev company, Balanchine and Tamarajeva divorced, and he and Choura began a relationship. Although they never married, they lived together as common-law man and wife from 1927 to 1933. In 1928, Balanchine choreographed Apollo, creating the role of Terpsichore, the muse of dance, for Choura. Although politics led to the ballerina Nikitina dancing in the premiere and officially being the originator of the role, Balanchine's intention was always for Choura to be Terpsichore. After Diaghilev's death in 1929, the Ballet Russe disbanded, and Balanchine found work as a choreographer with various companies. In 1933, they joined Colonel de Bazel's Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, and 5 years later, in 1938, she joined the rival company, confusingly, with a similar name, Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, that had been formed by Leonid Messine and Sergei Denim. It was in this company she originated roles in Balanchine ballets like The Sleepwalker in Night Shadow, which is now known as La Sonnambula, and the ballerina and dance concertante. She also danced Swan Lake, Firebird, Coppelia, The Nutcracker, and dozens of other ballets, gaining her devoted fans around the country as the company toured. After deteriorating artistic standards with the company, Danilova left the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo in 1951, whereupon she began accepting invitations to guest perform with ballets such as the Sadler's Wells Ballet and the London Festival Ballet. She also toured with her own group, Great Moments of Ballet, from 1954 to 56. Choura retired from ballet in 1957 with a performance of Raimonda in Tokyo, Japan. But she didn't stay away from the stage long. In 1958, she appeared on Broadway in the musical Oh Captain for 8 months. She also spent 2 seasons as the choreographer for the Metropolitan Opera. But by 1964, Choura was in a financially precarious position. Although she had performed consistently all her life, she was never paid enough to have a savings, and now her income came sporadically from choreography, teaching, and speaking jobs. It was when she ran into Balanchine on the streets of New York that he invited her to come teach at his School of American Ballet, the school that trained the dancers for the New York City Ballet, and the school which was modeled after the Imperial Ballet School where they had grown up together. She accepted his invitation, and Choura became a beloved teacher and mentor at SAB for 25 years, retiring in 1989 at the age of 85. As a teacher, she would teach a girls' variations class, recalling all the choreography from her Imperial Ballet days, teaching her students the steps of petit pas and fauquin and other classical repertory. She was known for her elegance and style and the great ballerina aura that she exuded her whole life. Choura has been honored for her contributions to art and culture with the Capizio Dance Award in 1958 and with a Kennedy Center Honor in 1989. Talking with us today about Madame Danilova is John Clifford, a former New York City Ballet dancer who grew close to Choura during the years that she was teaching at the School of American Ballet and he was dancing in the company. John grew up in Hollywood, where his parents were both stage performers, even making his stage debut in his father's act at 2 years old. At 11, John was cast as the Nutcracker Prince in George Balanchine's The Nutcracker, when the New York City Ballet did a season at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles, and they cast local talent for the children's roles. At that same age, he appeared on television twice on The Dinah Shore Show as a guest star, and was a featured actor on many dramas such as The Donna Reed Show and Death Valley Days. At 16, he choreographed and was featured as Baby John in a Los Angeles summer stock production of West Side Story. By 18, he was a regular dancer on The Danny Kaye Show, dancing alongside such stars as Gwen Verdon, Carol Channing, and more. At 18, he was also choreographing for a fledgling Los Angeles ballet company, and this is where Balanchine found him again and brought him to New York City to join the New York City Ballet. Within months, John was given leading roles, and at the age of 20, Balanchine asked him to choreograph for the company. During his 8 years with the New York City Ballet, he choreographed 8 new ballets, as well as dancing the lead in over 45 Balanchine ballets and several by Jerome Robbins. John returned to California at the age of 26 to found the Los Angeles Ballet, the first fully professional company in that city. John led the Los Angeles Ballet for over 10 years, performing in every major theater in Los Angeles and touring domestically and internationally. Balanchine personally invited John to return to the New York City Ballet on many occasions to dance as a guest artist. Later, John staged the Balanchine 100th anniversary galas for the Bolshoi and Mariinsky ballet companies, and has staged Balanchine's and his own ballets internationally. John continues to teach and pass on what he knows. I hope you enjoy our conversation. In today's episode, we're talking to John Clifford about his experiences with Alexandra Danilova. Thank you for joining me, John.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love to talk about Choura.
Yes. So let's dive right in. Can you tell me about your first memories of either meeting or seeing Madame Danilova for the first time?
It was both. It's when Balanchine brought me to New York to SAB when I was 19 to choreograph for the school. And they had done, I think, one workshop performance the year prior to when I got there. And Danilova was staging most of the ballets at that point, and it wasn't such a big production as it turned into years later. But I think she came up to me at the school because it was like everybody knew he had brought me there to choreograph, which was rather rare. So it was kind of like, who is this kid from California? I mean, what the hell is going on here? So, and part of my job, part of what he wanted me to do was to watch everything. I mean, I was there to, take class, but I was really brought to choreograph. And so he wanted me to watch her classes because she was teaching variations class. And I asked her, can I watch your variations class, Madame Danilova? And she also was teaching late C. Once a week, she taught late C. So I had her as a teacher too, and she was fun, delightful. But we'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, my first impression was she was, like you've heard from everybody, she was charming and bubbly and elegant without being pretentious. It's a very fine line. When you're a major star, especially for a generation, one can come off a bit grand, if you know what I mean. And I met a few of those. And she wasn't like that at all. She was definitely a star. I mean, from everything she wore, and I'll get into that later, always dressed impeccably, whether she was in practice clothes or street clothes. She was always dressed for the public. I mean, I can tell you so many funny stories. But but I remember one of the first impressions was I was sewing my elastics onto my shoes, sitting on a couch one day, and she says, "No, dear, no, wrong, Dushka, all wrong, wrong." And I went, "Okay." And she proceeded to take the needle and thread and sew my elastics on the shoe. And she goes, "This is the way. This is how you do." So from that day on, I've always sewn my elastics on the way she showed me, which
Mm-hmm.
was different than what I had done for 5 years or whatever it was to that point. And then she started taking me out to dinner, like at least 3 or 4 times a week, to the Carnegie Tavern. And she used to live above there, Carnegie Hall somewhere. But because she knew Balanchine, had brought me there, basically, to train me and everything. So I think she felt it was her duty to educate me. And I'd been a dancer on television. You said you read my book, so you know all that.
Yeah.
But I hadn't, except for my 6 weeks of classes with the Bolshoi and the other teachers, I hadn't really been, um, with a ballerina on that kind of from that generation on such an intimate term, having dinner a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And she loved to talk about Balanchine. I mean, the whole dinners were her telling me the stories of them at the school, escaping Russia, the early years of Diaghilev. I mean, she gave me a really thorough, I mean, more than I've ever read any other books, a really thorough um, history of those two together, including their love affair. And she didn't hold back, and I can tell those stories too. But she adored the man, and even though they didn't work out romantically for a long period of time, she didn't care. I mean, she was a very sophisticated woman, and she was very flirtatious by nature. She'd flirt with the waiters. I mean, she was just always. I mean, I don't know how to describe her. I mean, she was unique. But so we would have these dinners like 3 or 4 times a week because she knew I didn't have really any money. I mean, they were paying me to be at the school. So I had more than the normal boys scholarship. I had like actual living expenses, and a place to stay. But I didn't have like a lot of money to go out to dinner. So she was taking me out to dinner, just filling my head with all these wonderful stories of her and Balanchine in his early years. And then when I was watching her variations classes, uh, I was sitting next to her. So she would like teach the girls and turn around and tell me a story, and then teach the girls and turn around and tell me a story. And she was very well. She was obviously intelligent, but she was very witty, and she loved talking. Like she and Violette Verdi, I think they take the kind of equal crown for being verbal. And and what I now looking back, what I could see what she was doing in the classes was she was really teaching the girls how to be a ballerina. Her classes were not as technical. Tumkovsky, as you probably heard from everybody, was really the technical teacher at the school, more than Stanley Williams, more than Aglesky, more than anybody. It was Tumkovsky that could give you the strongest, solid technique, which is why Meryl Ashley turned out so well, because I could tell you a story about that. But Meryl really, when she wasn't doing too well in the company because she was weak, she went to Tumkovsky, and then within a few months, all of a sudden, then this Meryl Ashley technique started happening, and we were going, "Oh my God!" But and Gelsey Kirkland too. It's really Tumkovsky, but Danilova and Dubrovska, who were rivals and had a very funny dance between themselves at the studio,
Mm-hmm.
and also Dubrovska dressed impeccably like Danilova. That was just the generation. I mean, they were just they had a reputation. They were stars, and they were not going to let down that image, which was, I think, and I'm going to lecture here, very important for young dancers, because ballet is an artificial art form, because it's not a sport, it's not an athletic event, which is turning into a lot, especially on TikTok and different things. It's an art, and that's really hard to teach. And dance is a visual art, and you learn from observing. So you can teach as much as you want verbally and technically and say, do this, do that, do this. But dancers, I found, and I've been doing it a long time, take it in much better visually, and they kind of absorb it through their skin. And Balanchine always would say, you can't teach if you can't stand up. You don't. He hated teachers that sat in their chair. You have to stand up. You don't have to dance, but you have to move around. You have to be, and also it's disrespectful. He'd say, because he had me teaching at the school starting when I was 19, he would say it's very disrespectful to the students that the teacher is sitting. They're working hard. You have to give them the respect to stand up. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was nice. And you get a better result out of the students if you do that. And you don't have to lecture them about it. They just get it somehow, that the teacher's more in it with them. But Danilova and Dubrovska, and I didn't have any Dubrovska classes, so I can't say exactly how she was as a teacher. But Danilova was clearly setting this very high bar for the girls how to be a ballerina in the sense of an artist. And her classes were hard. She wasn't easy. She was demanding, again, iron fist and a velvet glove, which is how they mostly were. They were very sure of what they wanted. And the only one that had a mouth on her that could get very tart was Muriel Stewart, who could be quite, and she was English, so I don't know if that
Mhm.
had anything to do, but she destroyed some girls that would run out of the room crying. And I don't want to even talk about it, but we all looked at Muriel Stewart when she would say these things to some girls, and we'd go, "How could you?" But Danilova, since that's our subject, was clearly always holding all the girls up to a certain standard that she herself demonstrated on a daily basis. And from what I saw with my own eyes, is the students adored her. They respected her. These were the days when you could not wear sloppy practice clothes in class. Even the company found she wouldn't let us wear leg warmers or anything unless it was a very cold day. It was like in Saratoga, sometimes it get colds, and so we could wear leg warmers. But other than that, no. And so when you go into class in the morning and you have a teacher standing in front of you that is engaged and doesn't sit or eat a sandwich while they're teaching, or you know demonstrates as much as they can, and is demanding. And then at the same time, that there's a dress code, because Balanchine used to say, when the people on the street are civilians. He'd say, when you go into class, when you're a dancer, you're not a civilian. And he basically told us we were angels of God. And you get this daily by examples of him saying it, or Danilova acting like it. She looked like an angel. So did Dubrovska. I mean, extremely, extremely, always elegant. And Tumkovsky, who was crippled, when she tried to leave Russia, they broke her legs. So, because she was a ballerina in Kiev. And so when she tried to leave, they crippled her for life. So Tumkovsky had, her legs were a little deformed, a little bit, and she looked kind of knock-kneed a little bit, but that was from them destroying her legs. But even she dressed always very cleanly, very elegantly. She just didn't wear all the jewels and things like Danilova. But so Danilova, when I was watching her variations class, now that I'm, seeing what's done today, is they were all fast tempo. Bayadere, Sleeping Beauty, it didn't matter what. And she comes from first generation, the Imperial Ballet, not the Mariinsky, not Vaganova. She's the Imperial Ballet, like Balanchine. And so her classes and the way she taught the variations, they look like dancing, unlike what they look like today, which are like exercises in control, or possibly, to me, it looked like you're taking a written test or something. So Danilova was just always sparkly, always pleasant, and great resource for Balanchine. He loved that she remembered all the old repertory. And there were so many rehearsals that he would come in and sit with her, and he would correct her a little bit, but he would mostly say, "What do you remember, dear?"
Mm-hmm.
And she would get up and do it. And every time he walked in the room, she would just glow. You could see, this thing between them. And then Danilo, I don't know if you know, but when Balanchine was going to do Coppelia, I was the original cast with Gelsey. So we started rehearsing with Danilova. So she was teaching us all the original, like she was a very famous Swanilda. So she was teaching us all the pantomime and the in the second act, and the pantomime in the first act, and the pas de deux in the first act, the one with the wheat. That's pretty much the traditional, and even the third act pas de deux is pretty much traditional. And Balanchine choreographed, and the solo that Patty McBride did, when Gelsey left and I left and went to Patty and Helgi, that's the way Danilova did the solo. So all that stuff was authentic. And then when he was choreographing Cortège Hongrois, I was not the original. I ended up replacing Jacques after 2 performances, but I did go to rehearsals because it was still kind of part of my job to watch him and learn. And he brought Danilova in to teach the solo, the famous piano solo, the variation in Raymonda, and that's in Cortège Hongrois. And that was Danilova teaching it at the right tempo. And Melissa Hayden, she was 50, but she could keep up. I mean, she did it. I mean, Melissa is a force of nature. So, don't get in her way, mostly. But again, just a great inspiration for the younger girls. She loved giving her information, like they all did. It was a different generation. They took it as they had a big dancing career. They were ballerinas. They did that, you know, Danilova danced into her 50s, and if you look at early tapes of her and then older tapes of her, it's quite different. But because she was just all charm and mugging in her later years. But in her younger years, the technique was quite there. It was quite solidly there. But there's not very many films of her in her younger years. But if you look at, I'm a big one for going on YouTube and finding all the old videos I can of everybody, not just New York City. But what is just, so sad is that there's a lot of perfume missing. Just a great dancing, but most companies, I'm not blaming New York City Ballet, but so many companies, there's no ballerinas. I mean, there are exceptions. Tyler is fantastic. I like Mira, and I saw, I mean, there's always a few, but there's not I don't think there's the conscious effort. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's a conscious effort to develop artists. But the generation of the Danilovas and Andrei Glevskys and Stanley Williams, although he was not so much into that, he was more into kind of a style technique thing. But Glevsky, Pierre Vladimirov, but that whole generation, I studied with Maya Plesetsky, of course, you read my book, but that whole generation was, yes, teaching technique, but they were also teaching artistry and how you presented yourself on stage and how you walked into a room. I mean, Balanchine was the master of that. He really was very concerned about that. He just didn't want boring dancers, period, and he didn't care if you could do 10 pirouettes or if you had perfect turnout or if you had high extension, or he didn't care about all that. He wanted you to have, that in a way, but that wasn't it. It was, were you an interesting person? Did you have some interesting way of, like Suzanne Farrell is the, probably the pinnacle of somebody that just had such an interesting, unique way of moving that it inspired him. And then he made all these great ballets. And then every ballet that Suzanne danced, she did it differently than anybody else. So, he looked for that in dancers. Again, back to Danilova, he liked her teaching the girls because she wanted that too. And I saw Danilova would alter, not steps, but if she saw a girl doing something a little bit different, she'd go, oh, that's good too. Oh, didn't think of that. Yes, And the one I loved watching coaching too, actually Suzanne Farrell, because I was doing some ballets at Paris Opera when she was there setting Zagan. And I watched some rehearsals. And she was teaching them the right style, the right choreography, it was done for her. But she's such an idiosyncratic dancer that, you don't want to copy her, but it's kind of to do the steps correctly, you kind of have to copy her. And so the ballerina Isabelle Guerin was doing fine, but after rehearsal one day, we're all sitting around and Guerin said, I've watched your videos of Zagan. I need to do it like you. I mean, it's just, I'm trying to do, and Suzanne said, no, don't do it like me. That was me. She said, do it like you. And I went, yes, Suzanne. I mean, really good for you. Because a lot of ballet masters won't do that. They try to force the dancer to the mold that they dance the role like, It's a really tricky fine line, Anyway, but I know I'm digressing, but Danilova and our personal relationship really deepened because after I left the company to start my own company, I brought her out to LA numerous times to teach and coach. And then I brought her out to stage Coppelia, the whole ballet for my company. And Danilova, to give you a total idea of what Danilova was like, I'll tell you two Danilova stories from when she was staging Coppelia. I would pick her up at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. She was staying at the Beverly Wilshire, and I had a little convertible Fiat at the time, like a Spider or something, little convertible car. And the first time I picked her up at the hotel, and that my top was down, beautiful sunny California day. So she comes down and she goes, oh, John, why you not tell me you have convertible? My hair. And I went, oh, I'm sorry, should I put? She goes, no. So she pulls out a scarf and she puts it around her. She said, now go. So we went. And that was one time cracked me up. My hair. And then another time I picked her up and she goes, John, did you see this movie Fame? And I went, yes. And she goes, well, I taught class at, the high school for arts in New York. I taught ballet. And I said, oh. And she goes, but it was never like this movie. And I said, well, it's a movie. And she goes, but no, nobody would use those words. Nobody would say fuck. She goes, how would you like I say fuck? No, nobody would say. And I went, okay. Well, I guess, I almost hit the brakes when she said that.
Yeah.
To hear fuck come out of Danilova's mouth was just
Yeah.
boom. So we get to the studio. I'm teaching class, and she's watching, and I'm telling the kids the story. And I said, so we got to go. She's fame, da da. And then she said, nobody would say a certain word. And she goes, no, tell them. And I went, okay, sure, you tell them. And she goes, well, I said to John, when I taught High School of the Arts, no one would say, how you like I come in and say, good fucking morning. And everybody, all my dancers, we all fell on the floor. And
Yeah.
we had Sasha Mintz. You know who Alexander Mintz was? No? Oh, okay. Alexander Mintz was the one that Baryshnikov used in his as Drosselmeyer in the Nutcracker with Gelsey.
Okay.
So he's the one on the TV broadcast. That's Alexander Mintz.
Okay.
He was straight from Russia, did all the character roles at ABT. And I brought him out to do Drosselmeyer. And in my first season of Nutcracker, he did Drosselmeyer, who's hysterical. And I brought him out to do Dr. Coppelius when Danilova was staging Coppelia. And they had never met. Somehow in New York, they had never crossed paths. So the first day they were like in love and nonstop Russian, jokes, laughing, falling apart, and we couldn't get any work done because the two of them were cracking each other up. That I finally had to say, children, stop it, because we couldn't literally, I'm not exaggerating this. Everybody in the room was like, the feeling was just joy. But to watch Alexander Mintz and Danilova going off on each other in Russia and then cracking each other up, and she'd say something and he would fall down laughing, and he'd say something and she would just start giggling and laughing. I mean, it was one of the best memories of my life. Mm-hmm. And so that was some Danilova anecdotes. And then Danilova, as I said, she would dress beautifully in class, where she would wear a pastel leotard and then a pastel chiffon practice skirt that matched. Always they matched. So in those days, my company was traveling a lot. And we went to Saudi Arabia, and we went to Taiwan and Korea. And what I started doing was we'd go to the open air market sometimes. And we always found in all these exotic cities in Arabia, everywhere, these open air kiosks that sold reams of chiffon, but in really different colors and with different applique and silk gold. I mean, stuff I hadn't seen in the United States. So I would buy yards of different chiffon, different colors, and bring it back to New York and give it to Danilova. Mm-hmm. So then then she would make her own skirts in this. And one day when I was visiting New York, I went in to watch her class. And she stopped the class. She goes, John, you like my skirt? You like my skirt? And I said, yes. She goes, John bought me this in Arabia. And she was carrying on. And we continued our dinners, and I would always have dinner with her, when I'd visit New York. And the tables were turned so I could take her out to dinner. And so we started going, she moved onto 6th Avenue, and we started going across the street. There was a ginger man. And so we started having a lot of dinners at the ginger man there. The original one was on 64th, but then when she moved over near on 6th Avenue, there was another ginger man. And the other thing about Danilova, she really she was very careful not to diss anybody. She never would have a bad word. She was very careful about that. I know she had her opinions, and I know she had her likes and dislikes, but she was a lady, and she would never say anything at all critical of another dancer or choreography or anything. She did one time, she got fed up with one of the ballerinas that was coming up, and I won't tell you the name, but she did kind of say she didn't know why she was dancing. But those when Balanchine was getting really old, and he was kind of given up casting at that point. He was kind of just like the last couple of years of his life he just was very ill. But that was the only time I heard her actually say something bad about a dancer. But her normal thing, and I use it all the time, is she didn't like something, it was pas pour moi. Not for me. Pas pour moi. Mm-hmm. Did you like that ballet? Pas pour moi. I use that all the time. And the other thing, thinking of Choura, is that she taught me how to drink a drink she liked that she made up, which was vodka and sweet vermouth on the rocks in like a little tumbler, half and half practically, very strong. I mean, it was like pure vodka and sweet vermouth. Actually, I need to have one of those again. I haven't had those in a while. And and so that got to be like our drink. And we go into a bar, we go to, and they say, we'll just have a Danilova, and they knew what to make. It would be like very strong, but it kind of had a medicinal taste too. It almost, in a way, it could taste a little bit like a medicine in a way, because it had that sweet vermouth, icky sweetness a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And the vodka, I mean, it was an interesting, just need one or two of those and you were gone. But she liked those and she could drink those. So there's some Danilova stories for you.
You've answered quite a few questions already that I've got on my list, which is great. I'm glad that you brought up the little phrase that she would use, "not for me." Are there any other Danilova isms that you remember, little phrases she had?
Besides good fucking morning. That was boom.
Or even in the classroom, any a certain correction that she would always give, or
Well,
yeah.
tempo had to be correct. And she would get up and demonstrate. I mean, she would get up and move around quite a lot. And but she never slagged on tempo. I remember always clapping, making the girls do the right tempo, and she didn't give them an inch on that. And she was again very picky about style. It wasn't just doing the steps perfectly. It was the shoulder, all the épaulements like gone these days, but it was a lot of shoulder. If you look at old videos, the whole thing for these ballerinas was the style, and when I was young and first watching Suzanne Farrell, when she was very young too, we're about the same age, and she was really doing every ballet, and Balanchine was besotted with her. He was obsessed with her. It was like, but she had so much of this épaulement shoulder work going that I thought it was too much in my stupid 19-year-old ignorance, right? Because none of the other ballerinas did it quite that much. They had beautiful port de bras. Some of them, Melissa Hayden had wild port de bras, and but nobody really took the chances Suzanne did with these shoulders, this push, and all this. We called it genching. Genching. That was the term we used, genching. So we thought Suzanne was over the top. But then watching Danilova's class, and then lately, lately meaning the last 20 years, when YouTube came out and all of a sudden all these old videos start showing up, all she was doing was, and all Balanchine wanted, and all Suzanne was doing was continuing the style that made those ballets interesting and also gave the ballerinas a really interesting personality of their own, because each one did a little differently. And but it was never just port de bras, this or that. It was always, there was more going on. It was a whole body in the hands and a whole bunch of stuff. But I was just remembered another Danilova thing. One of the times I came to visit New York after I had been gone for years, whatever, I'd always come back and watch Balanchine's and take Balanchine's class and whatever. And it was when Darcy was coming up. And Darcy was from my school in Los Angeles. I mean, all of her early training until she went to SAB was at my school. And we had a fabulous teacher named Irina Kosmovska, who was a cross between more like Tunkovsky with a little bit of, maybe a little bit of Danilova. But Irina was a real killer technically. I mean, she was just really just make the girls do 64 fouettes. I mean, it was insane. But Darcy, when she first got into school, she was already pretty finished. And Danilova and Balanchine cast her when she was 15 in the workshop, Swan Lake, Swan Queen. And I went to rehearsal and I did what I always do. Balanchine sit there and I'd sit at his feet or I'd be standing next to him because I wanted to catch anything he said. I was like, I want to know what he's saying. So he was mad about Darcy, just insane. And he called her your girl when he saw me. Oh, your girl did very well, your girl, because he knew she came from me. But she was doing a rehearsal with Cornell Crabtree, the Pas de Deux Swan Lake, and I was sitting next to him, and Danilova was standing up, and and at one point Darcy did one of the back bends, and she closed her eyes, the one where you develop front and tap and then fall back, and she just go, and she closed her eyes and fade backwards, and Balanchine said, look, she's closing her eyes, she's so into, she's closing her eyes, and I was like, yes, I felt proud because she'd come from LA, But yeah, it was just wonderful to see Balanchine get so excited. And then when Darcy and Danilova, you see, really coached Darcy. So when Darcy was doing that Swan Lake, and I saw it, and then I saw Darcy right after that, she got in the company and she did second movement Bizet. I mean, like the next
Hmm.
day, practically, it was like a week or later, she was doing second movement Bizet, Swan Lake in the company. I mean, he just threw everything at her because people say that he put too much pressure on the young girls, maybe because he cast them in too many things. But that's what happened in his day. That was normal. I mean, when I got in the company, we had quite a few 15-year-olds. And when Gelsey got in, she was 15 and started doing Prince. I gave her first principal roles, actually, Gelsey, but she was 16. So she was actually, so for him, I don't think he thought that was pushing them too hard because they're young and they can dance and they have the energy and you learn by being on stage. That's where you really get how you really learn. So he would just, so Darcy was out there and the first or second performance of her Symphony in C I was watching from the front, and she was so excited in the finale. Da 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 dum da 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 dum. She was one whole count ahead of the music. She was flying and she was doing those kicks across the diagonal and she was one whole count ahead of the music. I was
Oh my
laughing,
gosh.
but it was so spontaneous joy. The love of the movement. I mean, she was his last muse. She was his last muse. And he, just another side thing. When I first got in the company with Suzanne Farrell, and he was going to do a new Sleeping Beauty for Suzanne Farrell. And she was only maybe 20 at that point, something like that. 20, maybe 21. He had already done Don Q for her, the whole Don Q. But he wanted to, and Balanchine used to take me to dinner a lot. So he was saying, I'm going to do, for Susie, we're going to do new Sleeping Beauty. But we can't do it in the theater. I can't because there's no trap. There's only one trap for the tree and Nutcracker. But to do it up, he wanted to do it like it was done at the Mariinsky, where there's a lot of trap doors and the stage can slide. And he said the theater just wasn't equipped to do the Sleeping Beauty the way he wanted to do it. So he didn't do it. Then 10 years later, I think it was about 10 years, maybe 8 years later, I'm having dinner with him, and Gelsey was the thing. We're going to do Sleeping Beauty for Gelsey. She's young, right age. She was like 18 or 19. But we can't do it because we can't afford to redo theater. And so it fell apart. And then the last time he brought it up was for Darcy. So he wanted to do Sleeping Beauty for Darcy. But again, until he could get the budget to really redo the stage or really do something, he just felt it wouldn't be right for Sleeping Beauty because Sleeping Beauty is a very important ballet to him, extremely important emotionally and history, and just involved his youth because he was in the production as a child. So I felt bad that because now with the technology today, I bet we could he could have figured out what to do with Sleeping Beauty with all the video stuff and all the rest of it. He could have made it work. But it's interesting, 3 different generation ballerinas: Suzanne, Gelsey, and Darcy, and he still wanted to do Sleeping Beauty. Anyway, but he would have brought Danilova in to coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to bring it back to Danilova, when she would talk about her performance career, can you share any anecdotes from the stage or about certain
I'm glad
roles
you reminded me.
in Apollo, Swan Lake, Firebird, any of the major roles that she did?
Well,
Either advice or just anecdotes.
Okay, well, yeah, now you got me to what I forgot before. Now I remember is
Good.
She didn't speak about any specific roles. When she was staging Coppelia for us, she got up on stage and did the whole opening herself. And I was sitting in the audience because we were on a stage. I was sitting in the public. And so she got up, and our original was Laura Flagg, who'd been at City Ballet, who's a brilliant soubrette dancer, just genius level dancer, Laura Flagg. I mean, and Balanchine adored her too, but she came to LA. But I watched Danilova transform into a 16-year-old girl. It gave me, I'm getting goosebumps now. I mean, and she was in her 70s or something, or 80, I don't know, but 70s. So I'm sitting in the orchestra, and she gets up on stage, she makes her entrance, she does the pantomime, she stamps her feet when the doll, doesn't look at her, and she's trying to get the attention of the doll. She kind of marked the whole first variation, and she was in her, leotard and chiffon skirt and little shoes, so she could move. And she didn't have to dance full out. She didn't have to do it. But Laura and I were sitting there going, holy crap. You got chills because you could actually see, like nobody else, she could talk herself blue in the face, but when she got up to do it, whoa. And I saw the same thing happen. I'm going to digress, but it's very important if you want to use another podcast. I saw Allegra Kent do that. on numerous occasions. I took Allegra with me to Royal Ballet to stage Bugaku. I always think Allegra is so underused. It's a pity because now, it's probably too late. But and I took her with me a lot of places. But one of the places that was amazing was Sacramento Ballet, where I was staging La Sonnambula. And Allegra wasn't dancing at all anymore. She wasn't even doing class, but she was still wearing kind of slacks and everything. And Allegra got up to show the ballerina the first entrance in La Sonnambula, running around with the candle. And it looked, I mean, she was in soft shoes, but it looked like it was full out. I mean, it was absolutely the whole room, all the dancers were sitting around. The director, Ron Cunningham, was there, his wife. Allegra gets up, she takes a point shoe for the candle, and the music starts playing, and she dashes out of the doorway. And it was like, God, because visually, then the young ballerina that was doing it saw it. And I had staged it, and I brought Allegra in to coach. Same thing with Bugaku and other things. But I didn't dance that role. And no matter how good I could be copying it, it's not the same thing as seeing one of the major interpreters do it. So you don't have to be, in your youth, you don't have to be able to dance full out or anything. But it's so important that these young dancers get this input while it's still around. And what Danilova said, one last anecdote, is Freddie Franklin. Do you know who Freddie Franklin is? Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Freddie was a friend of mine, and I brought him out to LA to stage Les Sulfide, and he had tons of stories because he was one of Danilova's most major partners in the latter part of her career, after Ballet Russe and after, Diaghilev and all. And Balanchine was the one who promoted Freddie and said to Freddie, I want you to dance with Danilova. And Danilova was probably only in her 30s at this point, and the most famous ballerina in the world at that point was Danilova in the world. And Freddie told me he was terrified because he was younger than she was. And he said, I was terrified to partner her. I was terrified to touch her. He said, because she's Alexandra Danilova. He said, I'm nothing. I'm just Freddie from London. He said, how could I partner this goddess? And he said, so I was very nervous when I was partnering her. So after a couple of rehearsals, she stopped the rehearsal and she turned to me and she said to me, Freddie, it's okay, you must touch me. But first, you must learn to know my curves. But first, you must learn to know my curves. I mean, that's her in a nutshell. And that broke the ice and he relaxed, but I mean, it was like, oh. And then the other line she had, which I thought was in the turning point, but I don't think it is in the turning point. It's what she said in class one day. Somebody asked her about being a ballerina and everything. And she says, but yes, because you have to be starred. How else do you get the jewels?
Yep.
And I think saying these things to the young girls, and she knew she was being funny, but she was also being kind of serious. You have to, if you're going to go on stage in toe shoes and tights, whether you're dancing an old-fashioned ballet or even a Balanchine ballet, you have to become another creature. And that's why I said Balanchine called people on the street civilians and the dancers were angels of God. So you have to, again, even if you're doing a modern ballet, I think, in my opinion, you have to understand you are transforming into another creature. And he would say, dear, the audience comes to see you. They pay money. They pay money. You have to entertain them. In New York, they could go to theater, they could go to nice restaurant, they could go to plays, they go to movies. But no, they choose to come see you dance, so you must entertain them. And if you get this drilled into your little head as a young 15, 16-year-old dancer, you start, most of the company, girls especially, you start carrying yourself in a kind of and if he saw you on the street looking sloppy, or Danilova, any of them, if any of the teachers, or Danilova, any of them, but Balanchine especially, if you were a girl, especially a girl, he'd do the boys too, but if you were a girl and you were on the street looking sloppy, he would think, no, why, you represent the ballet, you represent New York City Ballet. No, you can't dress like this. This is dirty. This is not good. You must be elegant. You must be clean. And it was like, I don't know, what do you think of today? And one last little story, which probably you'll cut, but he was having a talk with Hubert Saul, who was the critic for Newsweek magazine in those years. And it was between ballet rehearsals or something. I was sitting with them and we were just sitting in the orchestra section of the theater, just chatting. And Balanchine went off about that. He said, because he wouldn't let anybody put their feet up on the chairs in the theater. If you were like watching in the audience and you had your foot, oh, no, no. And he wouldn't let you put anything on the piano. Like you couldn't put a coffee cup on the piano. We could put it up. No, this is an instrument. No. So he's very strict. But again, I think it's necessary because it kind of seeps down to all the dancers that you come into the theater and you have a respect. You have a respect for your art, which then becomes a respect for yourself. It's all tied together. But anyway, but he's talking to Ubersol about, the dancers, they don't know, you can't put feet up, and everything, because this is church. This is church. And because I was such a smart ass. And I said, well, what does that make you, God? He went, no, Pope, maybe.
That's a good one.
I love that one. And I can't believe I actually said that to him in front of the critic. I said, well, does that make you God? And he didn't. He just went, no, Pope, maybe. Like, bang. Yeah. He was very fast on the uptake. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, Lauren, I've talked to you.
I'm loving every minute of it. Do you need to go, or can I ask you some more questions?
No, I just didn't want to bore you.
Nope, this is what I'm here for. Okay. All right, now I want to know if you can recall a situation where maybe Danilova challenged you on something, on an opinion, or maybe something with the company or how you were teaching. Did you ever butt heads on anything, or really nothing?
No, nothing, not a damn thing. And she would tell me, I mean, it wasn't that she was very
or advice that, maybe it's not something that she disagreed with you on, but just was suggesting.
No, the only thing, and it's going to sound self-flattering, but anyway, one time she was watching a rehearsal of the Gershwin ballet I did. And the girls were in, very simple, we didn't have any money. So the girls were in like all the quarter ballet girls were like in a white leotard with a short fringe skirt, just short fringe. And all the boys were in a black kind of unitard with white socks and shoes. And I was kind of thinking to myself, piano keys in a way, if you know what I mean. So it was just because it was concerto in F. It was the piano concerto in F. And then at the end, a tall girl that Danilova loved, Nancy Davis, who had been at the school, very tall. If you've seen any of my YouTube videos, I post a lot of Nancy. Very, very tall, but amazingly fast, and could chaîner like crazy, and could kick, and jump. I mean, she's quite unique. But and Danilova liked her a lot from the school, and it was, so all this black and white happened through the whole ballet, and then all of a sudden at the end, for the third movement, she comes out, Nancy, in blood red, same thing, unitard expression, and Danilova, oh. And I thought, oh, is that too much? She goes, oh, no, very good taste. So, I mean, I know that sounds like self-flattering, but she would have said, I said, is that too much? Because it was like kind of visually shocking, Mm-hmm. And she would have said, no, not so, she would have said something. But she said, oh, no, it's good taste. And I said, it was kind of like blood on the piano keys.
Yeah.
Because Nancy's stuff was fast and wild. But I'm trying to think. No, and I don't want to say the dancer, but the only time I heard her ever negative was about this one up and coming ballerina in the company that she didn't like. She thought she was faking it. As I said, she was always watchful that she would, like Violette Verdi, at the end of Violette's life, a little bit, she would be a little bit more blunt about who she didn't like or what wasn't going, but they always had this kind of that generation, this kind of really well brought up, I don't know how else to say it, respect for themselves, respect for the art form, adoration of Balanchine. It's just, her dancing, from critics was always compared to champagne, sparkly and bubbly and made you feel good. Well, that's how she was as a person too. She was sparkling, she was witty, she was not sarcastic, but, pas pour moi, was enough, and you didn't need any more from her. It was like, pas pour moi. And she said it like that, it wasn't, it would be very like disdainful, pas pour moi, And we okay. And her correction of the girls, I mean, you've seen some videos of her. I mean, they've been on YouTube with her teaching Fernando Bajones and teaching people. And you can see what I mean. She's right in there involved. She's clapping, I mean, she's, even though she was elderly, she's up there walking around, clapping, and keeping the tempo up, and, and always with her little quips about, well, how else do you get the jewels? I mean, things like that were always very feminine and making the girls feel beautiful.
I know, any teacher has certain combinations that they take from different teachers of their past, different mentors. Do you incorporate anything of Danilova in your classes?
Yes. Oh, she taught mainly the women, which is good because I teach girls too. But one thing I always, one of the go-to Danilova things is about Port de Bras. And it's very, very careful. And um, when you're doing like a big waltz combination, you're doing like a big développé écarté, or croisé or something like that. She didn't like just one arm going up, right? So you do glissade, développé side. She didn't want just one arm. And especially if things get fast, she said it was like windmills. Oh no, windmill. We don't want. So what she did is she always wanted to go through like a middle fifth, right? And then to the port de bras.
Ah.
So middle fifth croisé or middle fifth écarté, a middle fifth arabesque, usually, whatever. And to get them to do it properly, she say it's like you play the harp, you pluck the strings. So it's not like boom, boom. It's not like academic, but you pluck the strings by going through middle fifth. You pluck the strings. So I'll use that a lot, even when I'm teaching tendus. If we do a tendu here, and then we're going to go through change to the back like that, instead of just going this way or going one arm, it's you go through middle fifth and then up, and then you go back through middle fifth when you come back, and you go through middle fifth. So that way you get more of a dansant quality and more dancing quality, and it is not a windmill kind of arms going crazy like you're having a fit, because if you go through middle fifth, it also, well, see what I just did. It helps you think about the épaulement.
Yeah, I really like that.
Well, it's Danilova. And
Yeah.
it's not just Danilova, it's the Imperial schooling, because Balanchine wanted the same thing too. But
Mhm.
but the Danilova thing is something that, yeah, it's one of my go-tos all the time, every day
Mhm.
when I teach, and I'll give purposely something where I want them to go through middle fifth. And when I was teaching the steps, I was insisting on what I wanted. But yeah, I use everything I learned from all my teachers. I always say to the kids, I don't make this shit up myself.
Mhm.
I don't make anything up. I just have what I've been told by many people, preternaturally good memory. So every step I give in class, every combination is got a precedent somewhere. Whether it's a balancing class, mostly balancing standing Williams, I give a lot of for men. Danilova, especially the port de bras and things. Balancing was great from the waist down for the women. The point work, nobody beat balancing for point work, and so I just stick with him for the point work because I mean, what he got the girls to do, like Meryl Ashton and all these people, I mean, it's still untouched.
Do you have anything that Danilova gave you? Anything that reminds you of her?
The memories, and again, I told
Memories?
you my memories are great. Yeah, no, just the memories. When she died, I got a call from her agent that she had died, and I was just about to teach a class.
Mm.
And I couldn't help it. I channeled her the whole class. I did her voice. I did her exercise. I said, Choura, dear, now we do tandu, but we do tandu, baby, And I just went, and I called myself after, I went, oh my God, this is sick. I mean, the dancers must think John's flipped out. He's probably lost it. But I didn't cry when she died because she had a great life. She had it's one of the most spectacular careers ever. I don't know how great her personal love life was because she never really talked about that. I know she loved Balanchine. One other Danilova story. Here's another one. I think it's in my book too. Is she told me that when they were lovers and she was like 26 years old, and Diaghilev died, and he was starting to form a new company called Ballets 33, and they were living together, and they never married officially, but they were like common law. And she read in the paper, he didn't tell her he was starting a new ballet company. So you don't know the story? So it's funny.
As you're getting further into it, yes, now it's ringing a bell. Go ahead.
So she's reading in the paper. She's telling me the story at the Carnegie Tavern one night. And she goes, George was so naughty, so naughty. And I said, what do you do? She said, well, I was having, a brioche and cafe, and I was in the room, and I was reading the paper, and I saw Balanchine. George was starting a new company. And then they listed the girls, and it was Rybachinska, Tumanova, and Karsavina. 12, 13, 14. That was the age of the ballerinas, but no mention of her. So she's saying, so, but I mean, maybe a mistake because, of course, I'll be ballerina. So George had just bought a green, I think it was a Bugatti or some sports car. He had some money. So he bought this green convertible car. And she had gone out and bought a green Chanel suit to match the car, just like she did later years with her leotards. So she says, so I change into my green. George pulls up. I look out the window. He's in the car. He parks. So I said, okay, I put on this. And I look very good. He comes upstairs. And he comes in and he doesn't say anything. And so I said, but George, I was reading a newspaper about new company. Why don't you tell me about new company? What will I dance? I can't wait to do new ballets. Well, what? And she said, well, dear, new company, very young. It's going to be very young. And she said, oh, yes, I saw, Rybachinska and Tamara and, Irina. But what will I be dancing? I'm your ballerina, He goes, well, dear, not really for you. And because, it's only for young, and, dear, maybe you're just a bit too old. She's 26. And she said she picked up the perfume bottle and threw it at his head. And he ducked and he ran out of the room.
Oh my gosh.
Those people had energy,
Yeah.
Can you imagine saying to the world's greatest ballerina at 26 years old, no, maybe just a bit too old? And they're lovers yet. They're lovers. So she takes the bottle and she throws it at him.
Oh
I love that story. And but they certainly, stayed totally loving each other and respectful, till they both died, amazing. He died before she did, actually. And but that's the way to do it. I mean, that's just a wonderful, working, loving relationship in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
My
I just
last
wish
question.
just wonderful. Yeah.
My last question. What do you think was the most important thing that Danilova contributed to the world of dance?
Well, she popularized it, kind of like a latter day Pavlova, because Pavlova was traveling in stagecoaches around the country to dance. And Danilova, in her day, she told me that at the day of the Isle of Ballet Russe, there were only like 35 dancers. It wasn't that big a company, and they danced a lot. And they did a lot of tours that were very tough, very very a lot of overnight train. You get up and dance the next day, get on the train, overnight train. So it was physically very demanding. And nobody complained a bit. And sometimes they would rehearse, especially when the scene was running things, they'd rehearse till 3 a.m. They'd do a performance, and then they'd rehearse till 3 a.m. before they got on the train. So, nobody would stand for that today, and they were paid very little money in those days, poverty money. But they loved to dance, and they would put up with anything to dance, So the thing is that she wouldn't I never heard her tell those stories to the dancers, She told them to me, but I never heard her say them to the girls or anything, although maybe she did when I wasn't around, but I never heard it. But it was clearly what she gave to the world of ballet was generations that got her work ethic. Because she taught for many years at SAB, and before that, well, even during that, she was teaching at Carnegie Hall. They had studios, and she was teaching the High School of Performing Arts. Fame. And she. I think her, besides her time in the spotlight as being a major star and popularizing ballet, because she was the most glamorous ballerina of her time. There are other great ballerinas, really, but she was the most probably star-worthy, movie star, glamour, the whole 9 yards ballerina of her time period. And this was before Fontaine, so, before the Royal ever came to America and everything. So, Danilova danced a lot in America. She danced on television in America. There's a thing with her dancing with Tony Randall. Did you ever find that?
No.
I'll find it. I'll send it to you. It's so funny. Yeah, there was some TV show, and she's not young, but she's in pointe shoes. And Tony Randall, the actor, comedian Tony Randall, he liked it. He loved the arts. He loved to dance and kind of be involved with the arts. But he had this whole thing hosting where he danced with her, and she does a number on pointe, and her feet are a little sloppy at that point, but boy, talk about star carriage and everything. And she's over the hill, but she's flirting like crazy, and just being. She plays a flower seller, and she's just. You just gotta love it. And then there's a film of her called Madame Fifi, which I
Mm-hmm.
posted on YouTube. And again, it's later in her life, and her technique is not so great, but it's all frou-frou, she, but she's wearing it like just no skirt, so you see her legs. It's like a leotard cut, but it's a little costume and all. But gorgeous legs,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just you can see her technique is slipped a little floppy, but gorgeous legs. But it's the character and it's her presentation and it's her joie de vivre and it's all that just pops out. And so I think to try to answer you, is her probably greatest contribution was her teaching all those years, showing generations of young girls how to be a ballerina, not just be a good dancer, but how to be a ballerina, how to be somebody that's worth giving jewels to.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So, and that is a gift, you know.
Thank you so much for sharing all of your memories with us so that they'll be accessible to future dancers, current dancers who can't be in the studio with you. They can still hear a little bit of what you experienced. The Immortal Icons of Dance podcast is written, produced, and edited by me, Lauren Johnson. Our music is written by Shelby Rassler of Jenkins and Rassler. Technical support is generously provided by Libby Lessenhop.